This is the last week of waiting. Do not break now. Neville Goddard taught that the very hour you feel most tempted to give up is the hour your assumption stands closest to becoming flesh in your own experience. And that is why this teaching exists. For you, tonight. There is a verse in the 6th chapter of Galatians that reads, "Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap, if we faint not." That is Galatians 6:9. And Neville Goddard would stop you right there and say, do you see it? The reaping is never in question. The season is never in question. The only variable named in that whole sentence is whether you faint, whether you break, whether you let go of the assumption 1 hour before it was due to harden into fact. The field is already planted. The harvest is already moving toward you underground where your eyes cannot follow it. And the only failure possible is the failure of nerve, not the failure of the law. So hear this gently. If you have felt yourself wobbling this week, wondering if you imagined it all for nothing, you are not broken. You are simply standing at the last turn of the last mile. And Neville Goddard would say, the same field that felt barren in the 9th month always feels barren in the 9th month. That is what makes it the 9th month and not the 1st. So before we go further, let us claim it together, in the present tense, as already so. This is not a wish spoken toward some far country. It is a fact declared from within the country you already live in. Say it with me. I am the one whose desire has already been given. I am resting now inside the answered state. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am the one whose desire has already been given. I am resting now inside the answered state. The imagination creates my reality. If something in you just went quiet and settled when you said that, let it be your seal. Type the 2 words, "It's done," in the comments below, not as a hope, but as a fact you are quietly witnessing. And if you would like tomorrow's teaching to find you the moment it is ready, simply subscribe, so it can reach you where you are. The first key is this. What you are actually waiting on is not a person, not a check, not a phone call, not a doctor's report. It is a state of consciousness. And Neville Goddard taught that states are like rooms in a great house. You do not become the room. You simply walk into it and look out through its window. So when you say, I am waiting for the job, or waiting for the reunion, or waiting for the healing, you are describing an outer event. But what has actually kept it from you is that you keep walking out of the room where it is already true, and back into the room where it is still missing. This week is not a test of the world's timing. It is a test of which room you are willing to live in when nothing outward has changed yet. Picture a woman waiting on a letter that confirms a position she has already accepted in her heart. Every morning she wakes and for one drowsy minute she feels like the woman who has it. And then the mail does not come, and she marches straight back into the room of lack and spends the day there, furnishing it with worry, decorating it with checking her phone. That is the whole tragedy of most unanswered prayers. Not that imagination failed, but that the dreamer kept leaving the very room imagination had already built for her. So here is your work this week. However many days remain, do not ask what news came today. Ask what room you slept in last night. Ask what room you are standing in right now as you listen to this. It is not time you are waiting on. It is a room you have not yet stayed inside long enough to call home. I stay in the room where it is already true. The second key is this. The outer world is not slow. It is simply a mirror. And mirrors do not delay. They only reflect. Neville Goddard taught that the world is yourself pushed out. Everyone you meet, every circumstance that greets you, is a projection of the assumptions you carry within. So if the delay feels long, the question is never why is the world taking so long? The question is what image have I been holding that the world is faithfully, patiently, mechanically reflecting back to me? A mirror never argues with you. It never negotiates. It simply shows you exactly what stood in front of it. So if you have spent this week checking, doubting, rehearsing the disappointment in advance just to protect yourself from being hurt again, the mirror has not betrayed you. It has been honest the entire time. Consider the man who wants the reconciliation, and yet each night reviews in his mind the last argument, replaying the sharp words. Feeling the old sting fresh again, he believes he is simply remembering, but Neville Goddard would say he is rehearsing, and the mirror has no choice but to show him more of the same coldness tomorrow, because that is the only image he handed it tonight. This is not punishment, it is precision. The same precision that will now work entirely for you the moment you feed the mirror a different face. And here is what makes this so hard to see in the moment. The mirror is not slow to update. You are simply slow to notice how quickly it already has. Think of a woman who assumes, quietly, without announcing it to anyone, that she is now the kind of person people go out of their way to help. Within days, she notices a stranger holding a door a beat longer, a coworker offering to carry half her load, a friend calling with exactly the information she needed before she even asked for it. She did not cause these people to change. She simply changed the glass they were all reflecting off of. And the mirror, being a mirror, had no choice in the matter. This is what Neville Goddard meant when he said the world is a mirror. Forever reflecting what you are doing within yourself, not what you are demanding from without. So if the faces around you this week still seem cold, still seem slow, still seem unmoved, do not blame the faces. Look instead at what you have been rehearsing when no one was watching, because they are only obeying, faithfully, mechanically, the picture you keep handing them. This week, when the old scene tries to replay itself in your mind, do not fight it with force. Simply turn, gently, deliberately, toward the version where it is already resolved, where the voice on the other end is warm, where the door that seemed shut is standing open. Let that be the last scene you rehearse before sleep, because the mirror only shows tomorrow what you handed it tonight. The lag you feel is not delay, it is development. The seed is already true, underground before the leaf ever breaks the surface, and no one digs up a seed on the sixth day to check if it is working. Everyone is you pushed out, and the mirror is closer to answering than it has ever been. I am the face the mirror is now learning to show me. The third key is this. Living in the end is not a mood you visit once and then abandon. It is a residence. And residences are kept by repetition, not by intensity. Neville Goddard taught that it is not the one dramatic feeling of joy that convinces consciousness. It is the quiet, ordinary, almost boring return to the assumption, hour after hour, that finally convinces it. And this is the part most seekers never hear. Because they are taught to hunt for a single peak experience, one great surge of feeling that will supposedly seal the whole thing shut. And when that surge fades by lunchtime, they believe they have failed. But Neville Goddard never taught peak experience. He taught residence. He taught staying. He taught the unglamorous discipline of simply living somewhere long enough that it becomes, without ceremony, home. So let us walk through an ordinary day the way it actually happens for most people. Because this is where the assumption is either kept or quietly abandoned without anyone noticing. You wake at 7, and for the first 30 seconds you feel light, almost weightless. That is the true self before the day's opinions arrive. Then at 7:01 the mind hands you the old report. The bank balance, the unanswered message, the empty chair across the table, and if you accept that report as more real than the feeling you woke with, you have already left the end and returned to the beginning. By 9 you are at your desk, and a small thing goes wrong, and you sigh, and in that sigh you hand the mirror one more vote for lack. By noon someone asks how you are, and you say, still waiting, still nothing, and each time you say it aloud you plant it deeper. By 4 in the afternoon you are tired, and tiredness always tells the truth it has been fed all day. By 9 at night you are lying in bed, and this is the 1 hour of the day when the field is soft again, when the old arguments have quieted, when the drowsy mind cannot defend itself the way it does at noon. And this is your opening. Notice something about this day. Not 1 hour of it was dramatic. There was no thunderclap of doubt and no thunderclap of faith. There were only small, quiet choices, made so quickly you barely felt yourself making them. And Neville Goddard taught that this is exactly how consciousness is furnished, not by the rare, loud event, but by the thousand small returns. The same way a room becomes lived in, not because one guest once admired it grandly, but because someone quietly slept there, ate there, dressed there, morning after ordinary morning, until the walls themselves seem to know the shape of the one who stays. So here is the exercise. Pause for a moment right now, and pick one real, specific thing you are waiting on. Something you can name in one sentence. Now imagine, just for 30 seconds, the exact small scene that would prove it is already done. Not the announcement, the small, ordinary detail after the announcement, the way the light would fall in the room, the tone of the voice that would say it, the particular relief in your own chest. Hold that 30 seconds like a coal you are protecting from the wind. And understand that you are not trying to work yourself into a bonfire, you are simply keeping a small flame from going out. That is the whole practice. 30 seconds, faithfully kept, morning and night, matters more than 1 hour of forced enthusiasm you cannot sustain. It is not the size of the feeling that convinces, it is the loyalty of its return, a single quiet visit to the end, repeated without fail, will outlast and outbuild 1,000 grand feelings felt once and forgotten. I return to the end tonight, the same way I will return to it tomorrow morning. The fourth key is this. Revision is how you close the account on every day that tried to convince you otherwise. Neville Goddard taught that no day is final until you have reviewed it, and that whatever happened, however it happened, can still be rewritten in the quiet court of your own imagination before sleep takes you. He called this the discipline of the scribe, the one who does not simply record the day as it fell, but sits with the manuscript each night and corrects the pages before they are bound. And this matters most in the last week of waiting, because this is exactly when small discouragements arrive dressed as evidence. A comment someone made, a delay that felt pointed, a silence that felt like rejection. And if you carry that scene into sleep unrevised, you have signed your name to it as final, as though the first draft of the day were the only draft allowed. Consider a man named Thomas, who this week had been assuming quietly that a certain business matter was already settled in his favor, and one afternoon an email arrived, brief, cold, non-committal, the kind of message that seems to confirm every fear a person has been trying not to feed. He read it twice, felt his stomach drop, and carried that dropped feeling through the rest of his day, into dinner, into the drive home. And if he had carried it into sleep exactly as it was handed to him, he would have signed that coldness into his own subconscious as the final word on the matter. But instead, lying down that night, he did something small and deliberate. He did not argue with the email in his memory. He did not compose an angry reply in his mind. He simply built the scene as it should have read. The same sender, but warmer now, direct, generous, the kind of message that closes a matter rather than stalling it. And he felt the specific relief of reading those better words, felt his own shoulders loosen the way they would loosen at genuinely good news. And he ran that revised scene through his mind 3 or 4 times until it sat more naturally than the original ever had. And he told me later that within days the actual correspondence had shifted its tone entirely, warmer, simpler, resolved. And Neville Goddard would say, that is not luck, that is a scribe correcting his manuscript before it went to print. This is not pretending. Neville Goddard was precise about this. Imagination is not decoration laid over fact. Imagination is the very fact beneath the fact. So the revised scene is not a lie told over a truth. It is the deeper truth finally given its rightful shape. The outer event was only ever a photograph of an inner assumption. and a photograph can always be retaken once the subject changes. Do this nightly, however small the sting, however minor the disappointment. And you will notice the days themselves begin arriving already closer to what you revised, because you have stopped signing your name to disappointment and started signing it instead to what you actually intend. Do not break now over a scene you have full standing to rewrite before you sleep. The pen is still in your hand tonight. I revised tonight, and tomorrow bends toward what I revised. Breathe, and let me say this plainly. If this teaching has been steady company for you, let it keep reaching you. Subscribing simply means tomorrow's word finds you without you having to search for it. The fifth key is this, and it is the deepest one. So let us take it slowly, in pieces, the way a locksmith takes apart a lock he intends to master rather than force. Neville Goddard called it the state akin to sleep, and everything else we have said this week rests on it. First, consider what that drowsy border actually is. It is the narrow strip of consciousness just before sleep takes you fully. And just as you are surfacing from it in the morning, where the reasoning mind, the mind that argues, that checks the mail, that remembers the unpaid bill, has gone slack, and in that slackness the deeper imagination lies open like a door that cannot be reached in the busy hours of noon. Neville Goddard taught that this state is not a curiosity, it is the very control room of your assumption, because whatever you feel as true in that drowsy border sinks past argument entirely and settles directly into what he called the subconscious. The part of you that does not debate, it simply obeys. This is why one honest minute at the edge of sleep can outweigh an entire day of trying to talk yourself into belief, while wide awake and defending your position to an invisible jury. Second, consider how to actually use it, and here is where most people get it almost right and then miss the mark entirely. They lie down and try to think about the wish fulfilled, picturing it as if watching a screen from the outside, a photograph of themselves happy, and that is not it. Neville Goddard was specific. You are not to watch the scene, you are to feel yourself inside it, from the inside of your own eyes. So if it is the reunion you desire, do not picture the two of you from across the room. Become the one standing there. Feel the floor under your own feet. Feel the specific warmth in your own chest. Hear the particular tone of a voice speaking words that only make sense if the thing is already true. One single sensory detail, chosen deliberately, held gently, repeated a few times as you drift, a hand on your shoulder, a key turning in a lock that was once shut. The sound of a name being called the way it would be called if all was already well. That one detail does more work in 4 minutes at the edge of sleep than 4 hours of daytime longing. Let me make this plain with someone real. Consider Elena, who had been waiting weeks on a report from her doctor, and every night for a while she lay down and simply worried in the dark. Replaying the appointment, rehearsing the worst words she could imagine hearing, until one evening she remembered this teaching and decided to do something different. She did not force herself to feel triumphant. She did not perform a big emotion she did not have. She simply chose one small detail, the exact sound of the doctor's voice, saying the words all clear, warm, unhurried, almost bored by how unremarkable the news was, and she let her own shoulders drop, the way they would actually drop hearing that, just that, nothing more, and she felt it 2 or 3 times, quietly, the way you turn a smooth stone over in your palm, and when her mind tried to drag her back to the worry, she did not fight it, she simply returned to the voice, to the dropped shoulders, to the small, unremarkable relief, and let sleep take her holding that instead. She told me later she could not point to the exact night it changed anything, only that the fear had quietly stopped living with her, and some weeks later, the words she heard on the actual telephone were, almost strangely, close to the very ones she had rehearsed in the dark. Neville Goddard would say that is not coincidence. That is the subconscious simply returning what it was faithfully handed at the 1 hour it was listening. Third, Consider why this matters most in exactly this final week. Because Neville Goddard taught that persistence in an assumption is what compels it to become fact, not persistence as gritted teeth and clenched effort. But persistence as a woman who simply keeps returning to the same beloved room every night, without needing to convince herself the room is real. She does not fight for it at noon, she rests in it at midnight. And it is precisely in the last days before manifestation that the temptation to abandon the drowsy practice is strongest, because the mind grows impatient. And impatience always tries to seize the reasoning faculty back from sleep's threshold, saying, "Surely one night of worry, one night of running the numbers, one night of rehearsing the worst case, will keep you safe." But Neville Goddard would say that worry rehearsed at the edge of sleep is planted with the same power as faith rehearsed there. The border does not judge content, it only takes what is felt and makes it law. So this is the last week where the border must be guarded most carefully, not with tension, but with a kind of quiet, watchful tenderness toward your own drifting mind. Fourth, consider the ordinary shape of doing this tonight. You lie down. You let the body go loose the way it goes loose after a long, satisfying day. You do not force your eyes shut. You simply stop defending your position to the world, and into that stillness you drop one scene. Small, sensory, first person, the voice, the touch, the specific relief. And you feel it 2 or 3 times, like turning a stone over gently in your palm. And if the mind wanders back to the old worry, you do not scold yourself, you simply return. The way you would gently return a wandering child to the table. No drama, no self-judgment, just return. And somewhere in that returning, without your noticing the exact moment, sleep takes you. And Neville Goddard taught that what you carried across that threshold, you carried into the part of yourself that builds worlds. Fifth, consider also the other edge of this same threshold, the one so few are ever taught to guard, the moment just after waking, before the eyes have opened, before the day's report has been handed to you by the noisy mind. That moment belongs to you too. It is the same drowsy country simply approached from the other direction. And Elena did not only claim her nights, she began claiming those first waking seconds as well, staying in the dark a little longer, letting the dropped shoulders and the unremarkable relief greet her before anything else could. So this week, guard both edges of the same border, the going down and the coming up. For the state akin to sleep is not only where the day ends, it is also where the next one quietly begins. I crossed the threshold tonight, carrying only the scene that is already true. The sixth key is this: do not break now. That is the whole of it. Not because breaking would be a moral failure, but because breaking simply restarts the count. Neville Goddard taught that the feeling of the wish fulfilled must be held not once gloriously, but faithfully, ordinarily, across the days that feel like nothing is happening. And this is the last week of waiting, precisely because you have already done the deeper work. The assumption has already been formed, the seed has already gone under the soil, and what remains is not more effort, but simple, steady faithfulness. Like a candle left burning in a window through a long, uneventful night, it does not blaze brighter to prove itself, it simply keeps burning. And that quiet, unglamorous burning is what the traveler sees from far off and calls home. Think of a mother who leaves a lamp lit in the front window every night her son is away. For weeks she trims the wick, fills the oil, strikes the match, and nothing changes. No letter comes. No car turns into the drive. And on the 30th night, her hand actually rests on the switch, tired, half convinced the lamp has been talking to an empty road this whole time. And it is in that exact hour, the hour she almost turns it off, that his headlights finally catch the light in the glass. Neville Goddard would say the lamp did not fail for 30 nights and then suddenly succeed on the 31st. The lamp was doing the same faithful thing every single night. It was only her nerve that wavered. So hear this plainly. Whatever you have been assuming, however many nights you have already held it, Do not let the 30th night be the one where your hand finds the switch. The outer world always looks most unchanged the moment before it changes. That is not a flaw in the process. That is simply what the last inch of any road looks like from where you are standing. So today, however small it feels, however uneventful, let it be one more faithful turn of the same wick. Not louder, not more desperate, just steady. So if today feels like nothing is happening, remember that nothing happening is exactly what every last week of every ninth month has always looked like from the outside. This is not the moment to check the field again. This is the moment to let it finish what it is already doing beneath your feet. Do not break now. This is the last week of waiting. Do not break now. Here is the whole picture. It is not time you are waiting on. It is a room you have not yet stayed inside long enough to call home. It is not the world being slow. It is a mirror faithfully showing you what you handed it. It is not the size of the feeling that convinces. It is the loyalty of its daily return. It is not the day that is final. It is the day as revised before sleep takes it from your hands. It is not the wide-awake mind that plants the deepest seed. It is the drowsy threshold where argument goes silent and feeling becomes law. And it is not effort that carries you through this final stretch. It is a quiet, steady faithfulness that simply refuses to break. 6 keys, and yet only ever one key. Turned 6 times, the recognition that imagination, held gently and without panic at the edge of sleep, is the one power quietly finishing what your outer eyes cannot yet see. If you want a hand walking through this every single day, rather than trying to hold it alone, the 21-day reality shift was built for exactly this. It takes everything spoken here and gives you one focused practice for each of the 21 days, so the assumption never has a chance to cool before it hardens into fact. It is a small investment, well under the cost of 1 hour with most people, fully guaranteed. If it does not serve you, simply ask for your money back. You will find the link in the description below. Say it with me one last time. I am the one whose desire has already been given. I am resting now inside the answered state. Imagination creates my reality. This is the last week of waiting, and you were never asked to be strong for 100 more days, only to be faithful for these last few. So hold the room, keep the candle lit, and do not break now.